Good afternoon, students. Well, today is a very special day. And remember last week we talked about the switch realization, right? And we can, from there, and figure out how to create new converters. So that's what we're going to do today. So about switching converters, and we know that the power electronics originated from Caltech by Professor Middlebrook in late 60s and 70s. And we talk about pioneers. And today, I'm going to have the original one of the two pioneers in the power electronics field, Dr. Chuk.
Well, this is
not finished yet.
Oh.
Dr. Chuk started his PhD 1972, and he finished his PhD in 2 years. I haven't seen anyone on top of that yet. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, he created a circuit called, guess called what? Chuk converter. That is, I think, the only circuit that is after the inventor. Dr. Chuk is going to talk about that. Number three, what he did. He and Professor Middlebrook, they worked, they created a modeling method. Before that, the industry was crying. They couldn't do the analysis. They have the loop oscillation, and they couldn't figure out what to do because there was no method to do the small signal analysis, to do the Bode plot, to do the feedback control theory. And who found that method? Dr. Middlebrook, Dr. Chuk. They found the space averaging method. So today, I would say you are very, very lucky. We have one of the two original power electronics pioneer, Professor Middlebrook, here to giving a lecture for us. Let's give you one more applaud of clap.
Okay, thanks, Kay, for a nice introduction. One thing I would like to say for this 2-year PhD I did at Caltech, just recently, about a week ago or so, I was attending a Caltech tribute lunch on which I was invited to be, and soon that 1 hour will be put on my website. But Middlebrook started this in the power electronics at Caltech as one of the two universities in the United States. The other one at the time was the Duke University, and he did that by, you can say, accident. He was consulting. He was doing semiconductor devices and wrote a famous book, Introduction to Junction Transistors, right after Shockley invented transistors. And then he got involved in a consulting for NASA, and they just had on one satellite, happened to be a boost converter, which has a tendency to be unstable, and it was unstable, and they needed to fix it. And he started then, based on that, research at Caltech. Then, how I got involved is I applied to a bunch of universities, 10 of them, for after my master's degree at Santa Clara. I applied for PhD and got a number of offers, and basically I applied to Caltech because Caltech was the only university who didn't have a $25 application fee. Swear to goodness, I told them keep that, because that was one reason why I applied at the end to Caltech as well. You know, $25 times 10 is $250. That was my whole month scholarship at the time, you know. So, and how I was attracted, Dr. Middlebrook sent me the paper exactly of the same boost converter. Okay, and I looked at that circuit and said, I've been 9 years in nuclear engineering, control systems. I thought I know a lot of circuits from Belgrade University electrical engineering degree for 4 years, graph theory and everything. In Santa Clara also looked at modern graph theory. And I looked at a circuit that has one transistor, one diode, one inductor, and capacitor. And I didn't know how it works. So I said, oh, it's got to be very interesting to figure it out, okay? And the first thing when I got a call from Professor Middlebrook in March time, when it was being application being made, and he calls me out of the blue and says, here's Professor Middlebrook from Caltech. You know, I'm considering you for a PhD program at Caltech. And he says, I have one problem. You are A+ student for Santa Clara University, and I have this C+ student from MIT, and I don't know how to decide. And I said, Professor, I'm sorry, I can't help you there. You have to decide on your own, okay? And eventually he called my chairman of the department of Santa Clara and asked him how did it, and this guy, this Professor Chen, actually from Taiwan, he said, yeah, he was the only student who got an A+ in my 40 years career, okay? And I remember when I was doing his final exam, it was actually on circuits and graph, and he took my exam and went to his office because I maxed out all of this, you know, midterms and homeworks, etc. So he took my exam, looked, everything is correct, and he posted my grade. You know, they put it with Social Security number, and all the others were waiting for 2 weeks before they got their grades, you know? So he was, and he told me, he told him, yeah, he's good. And when I came to Caltech, you know, it's another thing. I constantly saw one guy, he happens to be from MIT, and he was constantly hanging in Middlebrook's office, okay? And I suspected that they might still admit this C+ student from MIT, okay? So, but I never had guts to ask and confirm if he was still, you know, the student who was admitted or not, or just accident. So when I came to Caltech, it was true. We worked hard in 2 years, from 1974 to 76. I generated the state space averaging, and state space averaging just happened as a coincidence with my invention of a Chu converter. So I'll explain you how these two are related. Because the Chu converter is the only one which has a capacitive energy transfer. And there is also a little story of that. When in 1974, I invented it. April 1st, I was in a hospital doing my surgery on a knee. That's when they took my meniscus, and invented Chu converter. And in 75, I made a presentation on a Chu converter in a conference. At that time, there was only one conference in the whole world. Everybody was there, and my paper was the third. First paper was IBM, and IBM guys said, introduced, at those days, imagine that's 75, introduced a digital control in switching converters, okay? I mean, how advanced digital control was then. And then when he finished, the second paper was, have you ever heard for a CPIC converter?
Yeah.
Okay, I call, you know what CPIC converter stands for? Single-ended primary inductance converter. I always called it the Bell Lab, and it was the interesting how they came up with the CPIC converter. You know, at that time, full bridge, half bridge, push-pull. Push-pull was very, how you say, a way how to make isolated converter from a basic buck. They're all derived from a buck, right? So then when this guy from CPIC, from Bell Lab, introduced that, he says, thank you very much, John. It was a nice introduction to my paper. Even though this was digital control, it was a completely new converter. The way they invented it, they existed already. From CPIC converter, you can make a mirror image and put a tapped primary transformer, and here you have a push-pull CPIC converter. And some bright guy there says, hey, we don't need the other half, all right? So he removed that, and then even that, and said, we don't need even isolation transformer, we just use inductor. Because it was same type as a flyback. It stores energy in that inductor, and then you split it into two and you get isolation transformer. So that was a CPIC converter introduced there. And you know, me being there 25-year-old and brash and sort of a self-assured and that I'm doing some great stuff, you know. And when this guy said, thank John, when I started my presentation, I'm sorry, but you know, previous paper was not a good introduction to my paper, okay? And And why that turned out to be, and you will find out in some way, I guess, in intuitive feeling. CPIC, yes, it is, for one thing, it has a pulsating current on the output, but it has a transformer coupled version which is just like a flyback, stores all the energy. And that means it's power limited, it has a problem with the efficiency, problem with the leakages, etc. And one big advantage, hopefully today I'll show you when I introduce the true converter, it has a unique way of isolation transformer. All other converters, you have a buck converter. You'll hear from Kate later on in the classes how you can get an isolated converter based on a buck, like full bridge, half bridge, push-pull. But all of them have a lot of switches, and you cannot short the transformer and get non-isolated version. This converter has a capacitive energy transfer, flying capacitor, which is split into two, and you get an isolated version. Okay, but just to say how we are productive, you know, when I did my PhD thesis, actually, Professor Millbrook wanted me to finish earlier, so it was December time, and I submitted my thesis after 2 years, and I had a professor on a committee. My thesis was 300 pages. And out of that, 150 pages were state space averaging, the other 150 were the true converter, right? And Professor Millbrook says, you know what, why don't you copy it double-sided so they don't see this is so long, otherwise they won't accept it to read, they'll take 3 months to read it. And then I actually did copy it, like here in double-sided, and when I came to defense beginning of December 1976, Professor Martel at Caltech said, oh, you cheated, you know. I thought this was this thin, but it's double that because it was double-sided. So anyway, I passed that, and so here I decided just recently to publish, we used to publish the 3-volume books in 1981, 5 years after my PhD. We published basically volume 1. In volume 2. Volume 1 is topology, magnetic set control. Volume 2 is modeling, analysis, and measurement. And then in 2 years after that, from 81 to 83, we published volume 3, which was advanced topics and designs, which was published, a lot of papers that I published with Caltech, and we published Caltech students, but a lot of them are my engineers at Tesla Co. And then now I actually put volume 4, added in the latest edition. Why? Because I found out that really, even after 40 years, there was so much misunderstanding and misinterpretation and incorrect usage of it, with making a circuit averaging models, making a switch averaging and so on, and they are basically most of them incorrect, but most important is state space averaging is now a great tool. I'll show you in a simulation how they can actually speed up one of the leading simulation program by a factor of 1,000,000. So you get in a split-second results, okay? Which you couldn't do that before because all simulation programs were stuck with a convergence problem a long time, with inaccuracy, you're never sure what you got. You change one parameter a little bit and then you get a different result. Okay, so here are all these 4 volumes now, and they are, in a way, 4 legs on which I feel now I'm building new power electronics. Because power electronics has degenerated into the field which is controlled 100% by so-called power management companies. Texas Instrument, On Semiconductor, Infineon, previous international rectifier, they're not interested in a final power conversion product. All they are interested in is to use a standard 50 years old technology of a buck boost and full bridges, etc. They don't need they are just changing and using better devices. So the whole power conversion field was turned upside down, and you'll see in my presentation. Instead of being based on new switching methods, new topologies, and then much better utilization of switches, it's just sitting there for 50 years doing nothing and increasing the frequency unnecessary from 100 kilohertz to 2 megahertz. But anyway, we'll get to it. So I have 2 sets of the books. I have you to, how you say, look around, peruse through it. And I think there is another one over there. So maybe have it circulate in 2 directions. Now, one thing which I believe is important, and I'm grateful that you have this set up, that I can go directly to the internet, is because I want to show you first how you can access to my, and if you don't get anything else, but you learn how to access my website. I think you'll do a great favor to yourself. I actually, for the first time, and maybe it's a good point to announce, I started my own, Caltech was started in 1910 as the first university in the world which called themselves institute, as opposed to universities. What's the name of institute? California Institute of Technology. Well, that meant it had a 6 divisions, 5 of them astronomy, physics, mathematics, engineering, and 1 of them was service division, social sciences, language, etc. Of course, Caltech always prided that MIT copies them, so Massachusetts Institute of Technology was formed afterwards with the same title. Caltech never used the name CIT, but actually changed it quickly and called itself Caltech. Illinois has its own IIT, etc. Now, I don't need to use technology in it because I'm not doing everything else. I'm doing power electronics. So I'm forming my own Power Electronics Institute, and it is all on the web. And you will be able to access, you will see a couple of things that I'm able to do now with this. You see here, there is one thing which says download, and you click on the download, and you'll be in that download section. I will upload a lot of the, it's basically, I have a box.com unlimited storage, and that's where I'm putting selected papers from all my past, present, and conference PowerPoints, etc. And I think it'll be a great tool in conjunction with, you see here, I have a YouTube and number of lectures. So I'm putting here a bunch of lectures. One of them is, for example, the most recent one that I did. You see, I click here. And this is one of the shots from my 1 hour lecture, opening lecture in Brazil, in Fortaleza. I click here, and you see, it tells you this, and you can, why does this visit tesla.com? Because I'll leave it at this point. Let me just, for a second, just need to tell you about navigations. I'm fortunate to have a very common name, Slobodan, in Yugoslavia after Second World War. Every 60% of men and women are called Slobodan and Slobodanka, which in my language means free. But my last name is totally uncommon. My brother with his 3 daughters, with the 3 daughters, and there is one guy in Texas which is all rich. There are 13 people in the United States which have a last name Chuk. Okay, so now when you put 2 together, you're unique everywhere. So if you now go, say, on YouTube and type Slobodan Chuk with the break in between, you'll get to my channel. Nobody else. There is another picture, another guy from Yugoslavia from that part, but it's the second in line. You see my photo and click on it, and it'll get you to my channel. Okay, that's one thing. The other, you go on Amazon and type Slobodan Chuk, and you got my 4 books, okay? So wherever you go, you end up with me, right? Okay.